Hello folks, Halo here with my friend Seek, and we're doing a quick update to 4 builds. We're doing the Aurabot, the Spark Carry, the Mana Guardian that also is like a cursebot, and the magicfind Tornado Shot build. We're going to start with the Aurabot. We'll go through each of the 4 builds and mention some of the changes. Take it away, Seek.
All right. So yeah, let's start with the important changes for the Aurabot this time. The thing that's going to matter, make most of the difference as you go through and progress the build again, is that the leveling has changed.
Rolling
So
Magma Armageddon
previously
brand, very broken.
we had it's pretty broken. It's broken enough that we're using it on both characters with like the exact same tree. It's a pretty crazy skill. So previously we had two options for leveling, right? There is the leveling with previously was Orbistorm Stormblast Mine,
Yeah, where you'd
and
swap to the
that is
Aurabot
the one that
quickly.
was geared for you swapping to the Orbot, yeah, like Act 5, right? So we still have two options, one for swapping later on in like Act 10, progressing all the way through, one that's able to progress through the campaign and like swap in white maps. It's going to be Armageddon brand Cremation, which technically starts as rolling magma. The quote unquote traditional Orbot leveling, where you're
Wheelchair mode. Yeah,
minimizing your
yeah,
respec
just
points.
following
You're
along the
just
carry
going to
through
like Act
acts.
4 or 5, like at latest Act
Yeah.
6, right? Start of Act 6. It's going to be, we've replaced Orbistorm Stormblast Mine with Rolling Magma, which is just generally stronger all around, right? The only thing that it really needs, if we go here, which maybe I should have actually displayed this instead of just hovering my mouse over it frantically.
But we got nine
um,
hours till league start. It's Crangled.
Yeah.
What
So
you
you
gonna
got
do?
you got rolling magma. The only thing it really needs to feel incredibly strong is right here. It is, well, one, it's flame wall. Make sure to press it. It's like 20%, 30% more damage early on. But what really makes this skill feel good and allows it to carry you all the way to like Act 5 and 6, potentially, is these two wheels. So if you go here, you'll see that we start out in like Act 1 and 2 using quartz wands. The moment you get this wheel right here, Dark Arts, you're going to swap over to using a sword and an axe. These can be random ones that you like picked up in Act 1, right? And then you benchcraft added fire damage to spells on them. You'll
make
unlock that
sure
craft
make sure to get one with
right
a high
about,
attack
yeah,
speed base. Yeah, easy mistake
right.
to make. Like you want a 1.5 attack speed base. You can just buy them from Tarkley.
Yep. These usually are like ones that I've picked up in mud flats or ones from the vendor. Act 1 bases, for some reason, the
And
first ones have pretty good attack speed, so
if
you
you can,
unlock the oh, yeah,
I was gonna say if you can find one with like a green red link, it makes it really easy
yep,
because you can just socket and leap slam faster attacks with momentum.
right.
You don't have to worry about it in your main links.
Yeah,
Or those
exactly.
aren't usually colors you'd look for this way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's gonna be pretty hard to find them on, like, your boots, right, when you're looking for caster colors, because all these, fire gems are entirely blue, essentially.
and the
Um
100% fire damage mastery, which is insane.
yeah, like, you look at these, you look at what Scion gets at the start, you get, like, 8% damage, 8% damage, you wait 10 points to get like 40-50% increased damage. Over here, when we spend, I think it's 8 passive points in these two clusters, we're getting over 200% damage, right? Like that is more damage than you would get on the entire rest of like the previous Spark leveling build, for instance, is what we used to use to go to Act 10. So these are absolutely insane. After you get those, you just pick up some life nodes that are going to be, sorely missed at that point, right? And at this
And
point, you get both life masteries. You actually start feeling pretty tanky.
you swap to
And
using Arma
yeah,
Cremation here.
if you want to, so that's the thing. So this is
Yeah,
the rolling magma leveling. It looks slightly different at the start. Both of them technically, like I said, start out using rolling magma. But the armor cremation is a lot more socket intensive. It paths a little bit more aggressively, which means that it's going to be using more respec points later and not going to be it's not going to be as directly adjacent to all of the Orbot nodes that you want later on. So the Arma Cremation leveling is really geared more towards going at least until like, not that you can't swap out of it early, but it's really meant to go all the way until like Act 10, and then you can swap into an Orbot from there. Or if you want to like go into white maps, it is actually capable of doing low tier white maps pretty comfortably. You can share completions with your duo, and then at the latest, I would recommend swapping over to an Aurabot from that. You can also do like heist and stuff, right? Before you finish campaigns, you don't have the res penalty. The latest I would recommend swapping off of that is like level 75, level 76. Probably don't want to go quite that long, but it does make for a decently smooth transition to the Orbach tree, and it doesn't require that many respec points. And that's something you'll see here that's maybe a little bit different from the previous leveling tree is that um, before when we swapped off, we were trying to like kind of force every single node to be an Orabot node. Whereas this time, I think the way to go is to allow yourself to have a couple of these nodes that aren't fully respect because the value of having them early on when you're progressing solo is going to just give you so much more room to breathe and so much more time to like think about the colors of gems you need, go back to town, buy your smite and your whatever and just mindlessly clear through the zones without actually without having all that pressure on your mind as your damage is just falling off a cliff, right? This way you don't feel forced to swap to an Orabot, and the few nodes that you have left that aren't immediately respect until the end of the campaign, they're giving you attack speed for your leap slam or block. Right here we have the quick recovery wheel. It's not maybe the exact first thing we would path to if we were just going to like all the aura nodes, but we get those anyway, and we're getting like life mana regen here, right? So overall, the leveling should be a little bit more comfortable, and you're a full-fledged Orbot at latest in the very start of Act 6, but you can swap off earlier whenever you want. You just turn on Determination, or you determination will be the last aura. So you can swap off anytime, Act 4, Act 5. This one is, I think, swapping off at the start of Act 6 as an example, and you just put on determination last and follow from there.
I want to jump in real
And
quick because
yeah,
there's
go ahead.
anger in the links here.
Thank you.
This is because if you're playing with like the brand carry, who's like an Armageddon brand recaller, anger's a really
Mhm.
good damage aura. But if you're playing an aura bot, you need to know which 50% auras are best for your carry, and run that. If it's an attack build, you want like Ath, Anger, and Wrath. If it's a spellcaster, you're gonna have like Zealotry plus. If it's like fire based, you want Wrath. I mean, it's just read all the
For
50%
anger,
auras on the
yeah.
wiki. Just spend like
Yep.
10 minutes, read through all the gems, make sure you understand what each of them do, and so that way you can properly adjust your auras based on which build you're. It's a common mistake. People not doing that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, good point.
Other than leveling, what else do we have?
Other than leveling, okay, let's go to the mapping versions. So these were not changed nearly as much as the leveling, but honestly, the late game versions hardly changed at all. So there's a few things we can go over here. So if you go to early mapping, the biggest change from last time is going to be the incorporation of an early divine blessing setup rush. So previously, I advised to spend the first bit of currency you get, you're saving up for Sign of the Sin Eater because it's just incredibly strong, right? You get that thing and you're probably doing double the damage you were before, especially if it's like if your carry is already scaling a bit of lightning damage, etc., etc. This time around, I'm gonna focus on a way to get a divine blessing setup, which you previously didn't have until late mapping, and that was also kind of iffy. It used a mana flask. I deleted it. But it used a mana flask that you had to press manually, time it with your divine blessing. In this case, all we need for the early divine blessing that you can get in white maps, you need Honor Home. It's like a one alch unique. You want to get one with a little bit higher roll of the important mod here that's reduced mana cost of skills. It doesn't have to be 20%. It doesn't even have to be 18%. But as long as you're not paying any more chaos for it, more than one or two additional chaos, you get one that's, above 15%, right? Aside from that, it's Ghost Ride, it's Bated Breath, and then you'll see we're running Perkle's Toe. Um, the amulet itself isn't important. Like, your carry might even, if you're still with the brand carry, you might even be doing fire damage for a little bit while you run this. But the important thing is you can anoint Righteous Decree. That is this node on the passive tree. It is a sepia teal, which
Yeah, super cheap.
if you're incredibly
Costs
fast
nothing.
to league start, it might cost like 3C. aside from that, it's gonna be like a 1C anoint essentially, and that gets you that this in combination with obviously equipping an inspiration support, having insightfulness, and
The
then
Dreamer
taking
Wheel and the
the mana
Mastery.
mastery here, the Dreamer Wheel, and finally getting you're gonna need to go to trade and buy any jewel with a little bit of reduced mana cost of skills. I think technically it's not needed if you get like a 20% honor home, right? But you're gonna need a rare jewel with this. And then that's gonna give you an entire another aura that we previously didn't have access to until you'd be like a level 85 or 90 character.
There are other
Um,
options for Blessing. One
that
of them
there
being
are.
Guardian's Blessing with Summon Holy Relic. Problem with that is the Summon Holy Relic can die if it's too high level because the degen is a percent of its max HP. The degen will be too much. If it's too low level, it'll die to hits. So if it's degening too much, you need to lower the level. If it's dying from hits too much, you need to raise it. It's kind of clunky. You can also use a Raised Spectre with Guardian's Blessing, and it's what's the name of the
Say
Spectre?
I want
It's
to say a Blackguard
Blackguard Chaplain.
chaplain.
Yeah, it's
Um, we'll
just
link a
go
video to it in the description.
yeah. Just go into any map with healing, like the heal sextant. Area contains monsters that heal. You can desecrate it there, and then you have it in your spectre pool. Problem is, they sometimes die, and you can't really easily resummon them in a map because you'd have to like desecrate, which you won't have equipped. So, Divine Blessing is just the smoothest overall, but you have other options if you want to mess around with it. What else do we have?
Um, okay, let's see. And yeah, to be clear, that the only time that comes into play that you would need alternatives is in the late mapping version. Alpha Sal is really good. We use that instead of Honor Home, which you'd be using also in the mid mapping version. Here, because you don't have Honor Home, you need to get a crafted reduced mana cost of skills during effect. You can buy, you can message people in TFT. Potentially, people in our Discord would have it, but this is enough to entirely cover the loss of Honor Home. The only time you need to use those alternative techs is if you're like already in red maps, 10 hours into the league, and nobody has dropped a Cinder Swallow urn,
They
right?
exist pretty quick,
Otherwise,
like
it's just
seven,
going to
eight.
be comfortable, good old Divine Blessing, all the way. So we go. One thing I want to point out, and that's gonna be the same in the what is it, the budget endgame version. So in late mapping here, I've done this. If you look, the skills are not colored. Otherwise, aside from budget endgame and late mapping, look like Christmas trees. What I've done here is I've taken the exact colors and links that you need on your body armors. I think technically you can find them over in like the POB item section. If you like hover over an Alpha's Howl, it'll show it. These haven't been updated. I believe they're all accurate, but the point is this is a lot easier for at least me personally to use, and I feel that like this is something that I would use myself, to save 10, 20 minutes trying to like find out exactly what colors I need during league start. Because um
It
when you
doesn't
just
show the
hover over
support
a skill,
gems.
it doesn't show the support gems.
You
It's
don't
like,
know
oh, I
exactly
need
which
Wrath,
colors.
Zealotry, and Flame Dash in the body armor, but it's like, oh no, you also needed another red link to have cast no damage taken, right? This is something that even costs me time, and I've spent well over 200, 300 hours in this POB over the past few years. So these just illustrate the links that you need for the late mapping setup and the budget endgame setup. They're not in the later ones because at this point, you just you can afford to like spend 125 chromes on a benchcraft, right? But this is where it can save you currency and save you time to look at that. So budget endgame, not much has changed. We're still same pathing, same amount of cluster jewels. We are still on Bubonics, and that is one thing I want to talk about real quick. Early league, especially on the first couple days, but I've heard also all the way through like the first week, maybe even the first 10 days, the price of the unique abyssal jewels that allow bubonic to function for you can be really expensive relative to the rest of the build, right? And you'll come to a point where you can put together the rest of the build for say like 4 divines, 5 divines, if Prism Guardian's really expensive, which it is some leagues and not others. And then there will be the unique abyssal jewel will cost as much as potentially the entire rest of the build put together, or at least like 2 or 3 divines, right? Now late league these go down, but early league that can be a problem. and I just wanted to let you know what you can do. If you can afford the rest of the build, I do recommend that you switch to it without Bubonics, and the only thing that's going to change is you're going to disable Zealot or not Zealotry. Zealotry is nice for the consecrated ground with the spell carry. You're going to turn off hatred,
Or
right?
whichever aura is worse for your carry. Going back to
Exactly.
sort of assuming you're
Yeah.
playing with a
You're just
lightning
turning off your worst aura.
Inquisitor build, spell build.
Right. Thank you. Try to keep it more generic here. But you turn that off. You go to your precision that normally is linked to arrogance because you're no longer running that 50% aura here. You've freed up a bunch of reservation. Precision, you just unlink it. It goes on mana rather than being linked to arrogance. And then you're going to need to find, like we had in some of the old builds, an abyssal jewel, or sorry, any jewel with the corrupted implicit, 2% increase to reservation efficiency of skills. And then unsocketing or unlinking precision, that jewel corruption, and then disabling an aura. That is the only difference between having bubonics and not having bubonics. Now, I don't want to say that as if having an entire 50% reservation damage aura isn't crazy. It's a huge power boost, and the moment after you have the rest of the build together and you can buy bubonics, you should. Don't try to hold out on it waiting for the price to go down. These things are incredibly powerful. It's just if the price is that inconvenient, I want to let you know that you can do those things to put the build together without having to farm up essentially the cost of the build entire again. Aside from that, budget endgame is, I think, almost entirely unchanged.
Ceinture.
Ceinture,
Ceinture
yeah, and let's
Benevolence.
let's talk about Ceinture because we are using it on the bow carry. So Ceinture Benevolence is a crazy belt. It's like the Aurabot version of a Mage Blood, right? It doesn't give you any additional effects. It allows your flasks to apply to the carry. Now it doesn't work on coruscating elixir, obviously, which is actually good because it would kill your carry instantly, essentially. Um, but this belt is crazy because again, it's like a mini Mage Blood, right? Mage Blood allows you to have 4 flasks that each have doubled effect. This allows your carry to just have 4 additional flasks, or even 5 before you get a coruscating elixir up. This belt, the thing about this belt is that you can use the knowledge that you have these flasks on the carry, that you would essentially have 10 flask slots. You can use them to entirely redesign your carry's flasks, their build, knowing that they're a lot more tanky, they can afford to grab more damage. Ceinture is even more supportive than it's
Yeah.
like a whole different dimension,
Like
right?
when we
The
league
thing about
start,
it, oh, yeah,
Seek runs Ceinture with like triple Ellie Flask, and I just don't cap my res because I just get the res from there, like with Janet or Granite and
exactly.
Jade, right? And then you take the move
Go into
speed
mass,
mastery, and I run like five
yeah,
damage flasks or like 4 with the move speed,
yeah.
And so it's really powerful if you can maintain link up time and kind of mitigate the downsides of it. But
Right, there's essentially no downside except that if you are to rely on it entirely, you're going to need to have close to 100% link up time, right? And that is a thing that can be a little bit taxing, or if you are not super experienced playing with your duo, you can occasionally break link up time, and that could be even worse, even more disastrous if you're relying on Cincture on 2 characters instead of one,
and because
right?
I've seen a few people ask if you're playing with a Mana Guardian, they link, not you, so you just run a normal build.
Yep, and then you just run
Move speed
exactly the
mastery.
flasks the
We
other
should
ones.
talk about that real quick.
Yeah. Well, the move speed master really is one and the same with Cincture.
Yeah,
It is the thing that makes Cincture good because you take this and then it gives you an entire flash slot, right? As an Orbot, you need to stay with your carry. Now, obviously, it's part of your carry's job to stay with you, but you really always want to be running a Quicksilver Flask. It's pretty much non-negotiable if you don't have this. And even if you're running this, if you're trying to stay with a bow carry, trying to keep up with a bow carry, or a lot of builds that your carry is playing this league can potentially take advantage of what is it, Oath of the Magi here. A lot
30
of
free
carry
move
builds will
speed.
be able to use this to get an additional 30 move speed, whereas you, the Aurabot, have all your sockets stuffed full. You could never afford to take that yourself. And so the Link Master here allows you to equalize that instantly and have an entire flask slot to yourself. And then if
Also,
you're doing that, you it just makes Ceinture even better, right?
Also, that link wheel says effectively if you're running Soul Link, like almost 20% more HP for your carry, just from the way Soul Link buff effect scales. It's pretty nuts. What else do we
Yeah.
have? We got
All right.
enchants removal. People are gonna want to know about enchants. Not a big deal, really.
On
Small.
the helmet, yeah, yeah. So as we go to the end game versions here, this one actually essentially did not change. There's really nothing to talk about, but that is the end game version, right? It's the upgrade after budget end game. Then we move to the high investment end game versions. Now these are the first versions. They're significant for a few reasons. So one, they all use different timeless jewel setups. I want to make it clear that the progression, they're part of the progression. This is like you get, your late mapping finished, budget end game, upgrades to end game, upgrades to high investment end game. The thing is, at this point, you can start to save a little bit of currency or min max in ways that make the Aurabot slightly more powerful in areas like offense or aura effect, or a little bit weaker in terms of defenses like spell
Yeah,
suppression
the
in your own energy shield pool. And these are just examples of how you can use an elegant hubris in that slot versus a different elegant hubris. Doesn't have to be the exact same number, but just in principle, one up here versus a militant faith down here in the same slot.
they're all
This one
about the
has
same
reduced
power
mana
level. You
cost on
just
it.
you can choose which way you want to do based on which timeless jewel setup you want or have access to.
Exactly. So they're equivalent in power level. They are the together the next level of the progression. I just after so long only using militant faiths, I wanted to give, an example of what else you can do. Now these versions, unlike the high investment endgame, or sorry, unlike just the endgame version, they used two things that were removed entirely in the patch notes. Those things are helmet enchants, right? All helmet enchants have been removed, and they used to use reservation enchants, things like, right, you'd get like a determination has 30% increased reservation efficiency on a helmet. They also used alternate quality gems. I believe all the versions before this used neither of them. So helmet enchants are, in comparison with even the other minor nerfs that the Orbot receives sometimes, sometimes it gets a little power.
To
This is almost
to
inconsequential.
put it into perspective, a helm enchant was less valuable than a single passive point on a mana reservation.
Yep,
So
this is a helmet enchant right here. It's
better,
actually a lot better than a helmet enchant.
So it's
And
literally less than a
yep,
passive point worth of.
yep. And so I have shifted some things around. Mostly it'll be like you lost 50 energy shield on the build at most. Clarity went down by one level. In some cases, I was able to get it back and nothing changed, right? So these have been adjusted to account for that, but it is not a big loss. It is, yeah, it's essentially, it's just inconsequential. And then the other thing that's going to be different here is the loss of alternate quality gems. It is unfortunate, and sadly, it seems like GGG isn't going to use the new system of transfigured gems to add auras in the future, or at least it seems like that's very far away on their to-do list. And so it is a little bit sad, right? These were
A little
they
bit of
gave you some
power.
extra power, right? Offensive, defensive, especially, specifically with armor. You can be losing something like 10, 12,000 armor on this version. Super high investment, you can lose 30,000 armor. It doesn't really matter defensively at that point. You are already immortal, especially against physical hits. What's important to realize is that they didn't change. They did lower your power level slightly, but they don't change how the characters are constructed. None of them. The loss of the alt qualities don't mean that we no longer run determination or no longer want to get gem levels on hatred or grace or things like that, right? So all of the priorities you had before, all of the links that you had before are going to be exactly the same regardless of whether this is a 21-0 wrath or a 20-0 anomalous wrath that gave 0.6% more DPS, right? The only change that affected potentially how you it made you change how the character is built slightly is going to be the nerf of divergent inspiration support, or I should say the removal of. Currently, what's nice about that is that the old quality that gave reduced mana cost is actually the
Default.
desirable quality
Yeah.
now. Or the desirable quality is the default quality now. So
It's
there's no
half as
alt
good,
quals. This is
but now you don't
just
need the
20
alt quality
GCPs.
gem, so
Yeah. And you can see here in the POBs, if you're wondering, they don't have the new quality yet. So what I've done is I've just set it at a 10 quality divergent inspiration. This is what a 20 quality normal inspiration will look like next patch. Yeah, I think that about covers it. The aspirational version, I made a few changes. It is a little bit more offensively endowed. I don't know how else to put it. This thing gives like about 20% more damage than it used to. Lost a little bit of energy shield. Again, this is really just an example of what you can push for with like a mage blood and a couple, one or two mirrors, hopefully. The budget isn't super exact. The character shouldn't probably be tried to be copied exactly. Um, but yeah, it just gives you an example of what you can push for, right? And the main change on there is you go for a Mask of the Tribunal now. What this does, it allows you to turn your attributes that you were stacking anyways, and you can get a good amount more than this, into cast speed, into crit multi for your carry, right? And this makes up for the loss of Phantasmal Smite, which previously we used that in a helmet. So that's pretty much the biggest adaptation we had to do to the loss of an alt quality gem in any of these builds is a helmet swap.
right.
I believe that just about covers it
Let's
for the Aurabot.
move on to the Spark Carry then.
Let's do. Let's
So
do.
people have been drastically overreacting to the Spark. They're very there's so much not a big deal relative to how people have been treating them. So TLDR, you lose up to 19% quality when you're like once you're in like red maps. You'd be like 19% quality left because you probably get a 20 quality gem, right? But then you just shift some stuff around, get a little bit more damage, socket in faster projectiles, and you have more projectile speed than you did before. And you just made up for the damage by either investing just a little bit more, like the Spark Carry was held together with like duct tape and spit. It was really like it was so like ridiculously cheap and like not invested in that you can
Yeah.
just do a little bit of investment, and then you even have there's still so many things you can invest in that would give you a ton of damage. So it won't feel different. I don't think. Heat Shiver, kind of a fake nerf too. Like it's significant, but it's also the things that you weren't killing, you weren't freezing, right? Because you have to hit a certain percentage of their health, and the things that you were killing were kind of dying anyway, so it won't be as noticeable. This is still a helmet that gives you 30 to 60% more damage, so not a big deal. Let's see. We made some changes. We tossed the POB back
Yeah.
and
I
forth.
mean,
So
I think the main thing to take note of is the like all I believe every version now uses
oh, Burden of Truth.
projectile speed support. Oh, let's talk about that belt.
This is a fun belt. But yeah, we use Proj Speed in the main links. This
Yep.
is actually the in-game version. This is a version that uses 8-link gloves. There is a video by Spicy Sushi on how to craft these. It should be like 10 to 20 divines, less if you accept a worse roll. Before, it wasn't really worth using these gloves because it just was kind of expensive. Now, this version is actually more powerful. You might have to spend another 10 or 15 divs, but you'll actually be significantly more powerful for having spent it. So we'll link that video down in the description. Burden of Truth. This is probably my new favorite item in the game. It just feels so nice. Like
Yeah, I mean, but this thing, it's all of the effects of Mind Over Matter plus Eldritch Battery in a ratio that is a little bit more convenient for the carry. It gives you a crazy amount of maximum energy shield just by itself. This thing allows you to run Righteous Fire with incredibly comfortably with like 85 max res. It's entirely free. This
it,
belt just makes you tankier. It enables Righteous Fire earlier. It is so comfortable, and for some reason this belt is like a divine at most. I mean, this
it's
thing,
cheaper than that. It's
it's
usually
a it's
like
a Cirrus
10C or
drop.
something, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Divine is like I say that
Like
because
on League
I've
Start,
couple leagues I've like dropped the first one or two of them, sold it to a random like Righteous Fire character for a divine, and then the next one I drop goes for like 50C. The next one's 30C. Yeah, it's incredibly accessible for how powerful it is.
Also, Annihilation's approach. These got buffed this league from 10,000 fire damage to 6,000, and then with using Burden of Truth, also with the Guardian, Forbidden Flame, and Flesh being more accessible in the Aurabot, you can just kind of get free adrenaline. It's, yeah, why not, right? What else did we have? We added an impossible escape to this version for Mage Bane just to
Uh,
grab duration.
the
Oh no,
endgame
I added
version,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, I added this. If you can get it, just get some more duration. It'll feel really nice. We're actually stacking significantly more duration and projectile speed on the in-game version than we did before. The reason for that is when I played a Spark character in Blast from the Past, I kind of just thought, why don't I get more of the stats that feel good to play with Spark? And
Yeah.
so that's what we've done.
There's just a little bit of room in this build to exchange hundreds of millions of DPS for a couple of feel good stats, and that's largely what's been done for the Spark character.
uh,
More than enough to make up for the
yeah.
nerfs in the later investment versions.
Basically, we went through the versions, just updated things, changed them, made a lot of general improvements. Over at Magicfind Land, Seek actually put a lot of work into this one to
Yeah, this thing
make it just feel a lot better. It's
it should
actually,
be much more friendly in the context of trying to run 8 mod maps. It should be able to do essentially every 8 mod map except for combinations of a few of them and minus max res, basically. It has a lot more quant and rarity than it did before. The damage is about the same. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just all around better at what it is trying to do, which is run maps quickly, a lot of magic find, and just be able to put in like an 8 mod map over and over and over, clear them out in a minute or two, and not have to think about what you're doing too much.
yep, short version is if you were wanting to play Spark and were worried about the nerfs, you can kind of just pretend they don't exist, follow the PoB, and you probably wouldn't even notice the difference. Your projectiles will actually be a little faster, because we're running faster proj, so it might even feel better. Also, the Spark gem, there's like the chaotic wobbly transkrangle
That
gem.
thing looks fun.
Yeah, it's like the event stability, and then there's one that fires in a circle. None of them seem drastically better. Anime Princess put out a really good video just talking about them. We'll put that in the description if we remember to. I'll write a note here. If you want some more info on that, but that might make Spark feel good to play. They seem interesting. The instability one seems particularly good.
Yeah, that thing seems like it might be on the endgame version where you have a ton of damage already. You can afford to have a few of your sparks go backwards if it means that the ones going forward are just that much faster than would otherwise be possible. It
So it like kind of
it does
clears
seem
out
like
in
a lot
front
of
of you a
fun to
little
play.
faster, potentially so.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, is there anything else in the
And
Spark carry?
fires in a circle. If you want to hold down one button in a simulacrum, it does have a use case.
I can't think of anything left on the Spark carry. I think we're good to go.
That's about it. It's
Kind of
just a
reworked
lot
the
of
pathing on a few
minor
things.
changes on the passive tree. Dropped a few life nodes, got a little damage, got a little QOL. I
We
don't think
did
there's anything too significant.
we did sort of rework the old endgame version into two versions, one that's a little cheaper and one that's more expensive, so you have some higher investment options. So now you have mid-game and end-game options here.
No, yeah, that's a good point.
So that'll just give you a better transition, like a middle stepping point between one that's a little cheaper than it was before and now one that's more expensive. All right, let's go through the Mana Guardian Cursebot real quick. So when sitting down to review this character, I spent like a good while just going over it, checking everything, and realized that
And I
basically
realized that it
nothing
is
changed
perfect.
for it. Yeah, it was just solid build. So one thing that I wanted to take note of, the leveling path for it is sort of a path for minimizing respec points. You're kind of just following around your party and being carried. Depending on if you're just playing with friends, that's probably fine. But if you're trying to push content, you should probably just play like a Guardian SRS build and just be one of the pushers that's like doing Atlas pushing and progression. And so you just do that, you farm a bunch of currency, you gear your Aurabot, and then finally, once you have enough currency, you swap, do respec. But this is a leveling tree for not doing that for minimum respec points. I wanted to go over what this build is used for. So the Mana Guardian Cursebot is strong when you want to add power to a party. If you are just trying to make as much currency as possible and you have 3 people in your party, Especially if you're doing like magic find boxes. Like if you're magic finding, you should just play a carry and a culler. So do like a spark carry or a tornado shot carry along with a culler and an Aurabot, because adding a culler gives you more magic find, which gives you more currency. Adding a mana guardian cursebot to your build, while it will make your party stronger, with the like meta magic find content being fairly easy, it's not like you need that power necessarily.
Right. It allows you to do harder content a lot of the time, especially given the base power level of Orbot plus carry, maybe with a color. There's just not harder content that you're incentivized to do, right? Like Halo said, with the Magic Find meta being very favorable to Delimir, this is a character that you can use if you just want as much power as possible. If you want to be doing ultimatums, for instance, that don't scale with Magic Find at all, that you would never want to have a color in that party, depending on just how difficult the like wave 13 effective like wave 14, 15 ultimatums are. This could potentially be a very useful character to have there as your third if you're trying to do incredibly hard content, or you're trying to do things that scale with flat rewards. An ultimatum probably hopefully, fulfills both of those conditions.
On the subject of playing with a culler, so this would be like a really strong fourth build for a party, because you get like most of the value of a mana guardian, and then like half the value of a curse bot, kind of. So
Yep.
it's like a really strong fourth build. But if you are playing with a culler, you need to take ancestral bond here, so that way you can't kill enemies. And also, if you're playing with any magic find build, you want to not run as an Ask Gentle Touch. You just swap to a Shaper's Touch with like Temp Chains Unhit, implicit, super cheap, simple adaptation you could. One thing I wanted to also touch on was mana sustain with this build. Because we run Shavron's Revelation, we cannot regenerate mana. So you have a handful of options of how you want to deal with this. The first option is don't run Shavron's Revelation. It's really good, but you don't have to. If you don't like any of the other options, you can just run a different ring. It's totally fine. Second option, and the rest of them, you have a bunch of masteries and things on the tree that you can take to regain mana. So we take this mastery to recover 1% of life and mana when we curse a non-cursed enemy. So as long as you're cursing things, you'll be getting a lot of mana back. You can also take a number of mana masteries. For example, the recover 10% of mana over 1 second when you use a guard skill. This is a really simple one. You take this mastery and then you run around with Molten Shell and left click, and you're just or full mana. You can take the damage taken recoup mastery. Try some combination of these where 10% of the damage you take is recouped as mana, and because you're linking everyone with Soul Link, you're taking a fair amount of damage. You can also get like reduced mana cost. You have options here, but the guard skill is probably the simplest, and that was something I saw some people having some problems with. We do, of course, link and use Ceinture of Benevolence. There was a bug with Ceinture of Benevolence, which it would disable like flasks, specifically the Aurabot ones that where you'd have like the same flask type in
Yeah,
the same
it was.
slot. It was hot fixed like a couple weeks after the league, but that's not something you have to worry about. And then the last thing on this character to talk about is curse selection. Right now, this character is running 5 curses. It's running Sniper's Mark, Punishment, Enfeeble, along with Temp Chains. Maybe it's only 4. I think it's 5. I'm very tired. Got 2 power charges on the tree, so we must... No, only 1. Yeah, it's a 4 curse setup. And so we're running 4 curses. None of the Ellie curses are being run. If you're running with an Inquisitor carry, those curses don't do anything. And even if you're running with like a non-Inquisitor carry, you're probably taking the Ellie Resist Inversion Mastery. So while those curses are good, they aren't as good as you'd think. You know, you're only getting like 2/3, half to 2/3 of the value because of the way that mastery works. And so, you know, at a certain point, you can invest a lot into those elemental curses and then not take the mastery. But unless you're willing to do that, I think the 4 curse setup is a nice balance. I think that's about it. Any other thoughts on the Mana Guardian Curse Spot, Seek?
I don't think so. I just love that if you go to items with this character, the carry, we're just slowly turning into entirely unique items.
It's
And
true.
I think that trend is gonna continue with the second character, right?
Well,
For
I
this
mean,
next character here.
it's the Magic
We've
Find
got we've
Tornado
got
Shot
like 2
Deadeye.
rares, right? Or sorry, a rare and a magic item. Of course, we would never want to use more than one
You've,
rare item because
you get
we
like
got
one of each type,
three
you know.
slots taken up by Ascetic.
Okay, the quiver. The way you craft this quiver, and I've mentioned it before, but I want to mention it again because this is always a huge profit craft. Like when I was playing this character, both times I'd play it, I was like just watching for quivers with +1 chain. You use the tainted, was it the tainted chaos orb?
It's Tainted Chaos Orb,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
They
it
find any
re-rolls it.
rare quiver with +1 chain, they're gonna drop Corrupted and Rare, and then,
You
yeah,
just
as
tainted
you were saying.
chaos, and it becomes white after a couple clicks. And people were selling rare +1 chain quivers for like a divine, and then the white ones, which work with Ascetic, like the normal rarity, those were selling for like 4 or 5 divines. So I don't know, I've made like 10 divines each to the leagues that I've paid attention to this. So that's how you get this chain. You can also just put quivers on your filter and vol a bunch of them. That's what we did to farm one when it didn't exist. Uh, Kaom's spirit got kind of deleted. It's probably not terrible, but we have a better option
It
now.
still would work if you went, like, really high investment and then you had Guardian on the,
The Aurabot.
Guardian is sub-ascendancy on the Aurabot, because that life regeneration rate does apply to Calms retroactively, or quote unquote. So that might enable it later on, but a lot of people have been working on different solutions, some of them crazier than others, some of them generating 50 rage a second, some of them requiring half your character. So there's a lot of different options floating out there right now. I think one of the front runners is that if you want similar, if not more, rage generation compared to what we had with Calm Spirit, is you use cast on, is it Poacher's Mark? I want to say
It's Warlord's Mark.
Warlord's Mark. Okay. You use Warlord's Mark cast on crit and a Mana Forged Arrow setup that will proc it very frequently when you attack. You kill an enemy, you're going to get,
20
or
rage
sorry, you
over one
stun an
second.
enemy,
Yeah.
you're going to get rage. Yeah.
And the thing that Snube figured out was that you stun is weird. If you freeze an enemy, then it can't be stunned. So you need to use Secrets of Suffering so that it stops you from freezing, so that that monster becomes eligible to stun, which then allows the rage generation off of this setup to proc. Again, just check out Snube's channel. It's got a lot of really good videos about like farming strats and magic find in general. So you probably already want to be there. Now you extra want to be there for more info about this. I kind of reworked the leveling skills. I swapped stuff around on the tree, um, integrated a mana forged setup, added returning projectiles to lightning arrow, just kind of cleaned it up and made it a lot better than it was. And so, yeah, that's the update here. I think there was one other thing. Oh yes, I wanted to talk about
Was there? Are we
Fizbo.
about to talk about Life Loop?
We're
Oh,
gonna
Fizbo.
Fizbo.
God,
Everybody
it's never
always
Life
wants to
Loop.
say, when do you play Fizbo as a Magic Find Tornado Shot carry with an Aurabot? And the answer, and I think this is just true, if you are trying to make as much currency as possible, using a Fizbo is actually just running it down. It's troll. You should not do it because the amount of currency that you have to spend on a Fizbo for it to be better is like upwards of 100 divines. And then maybe you also need a headhunter. The reason solo builds care so much about a Fizbo is because they can multiply their base damage with hatred, and they sort of like doubled their base damage on their bow. But because we're running an Aurabot that's giving us 3 sources of massive flat added elemental damage from Smite, Wrath, and Anger, the damage on our bow, like our prefixes, don't they're like diminished in importance because of how massive the flat damage you get from an Aurabot is. So let me show you something right here. On a normal bow character, getting like added flat damage, like this is mandatory. You cannot go for any other prefix here. When you have an Aurabot, your suffixes actually matter way more. Getting attack speed and getting crit chance and getting additional arrows is very important, and you can often find like really cheap bows that have attack speed +2 arrows and an open suffix for crit chance or even crit chance on them for very cheap, but they just have like 400 or 500 EDPS. You know, we were doing 100% deli with a bow character with like a 500 EDPS bow. And when we upgraded to a Fizbo, which we actually crafted that league, it was the best Fizbo in the game at the time. It was mirrored like 13 times. The damage didn't feel better because our damage was already enough to clear the whole map and do
Yeah.
everything anyway. So, but let me show you here. You can take this like flat damage prefix and get like Ellie damage with attacks, and it's exactly the same as good. It's just as good because of how much flat damage you have from the Aurabot. So you can get a bow that has, like, for example, only 2 flat damage prefixes or only 1. Get like elemental damage with attacks, or there's a unveiled mod I think for
Yeah.
pen, you know,
Attacks pen,
attacks pen.
16%.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yep, that's the short of it on a phys bow and a bow as a carry build. Any other last thoughts?
Uh, I mean, I think you showed it pretty well. Your Aurabot. That's why you invest into the Aurabot. They are your bow. They're like having 2 bows strapped to your back, firing out multiple arrows behind you. Like you look at that bow, it was a 1,000 EDPS, and Aurabot's like 1.5 of those just floating behind you. It's like the new animate weapon, you know? The what is it? Animate weapon of ranged attack.
Dude, the new
The Aurabot turns you into that.
I'm excited to mess around with some of the new gems. It's gonna be
Oh,
cool.
they look so fun.
You know,
Zombie, raised zombie of falling.
while we're
I've got
here,
my sights set on it.
and because we're on a roll and it's, not very scripted video, we're just kind of sending it. I'm going to show the Atlas tree we plan on doing just because people have asked. Just a very simple one,
Yeah, it's a good time to do it.
and might as well, right? Why not? So we're going to be farming Ultimatum, Abyss, and Guardian Invitations. That's going to be our day 1 strat. The idea is you get these nodes up here, you run Destructive Play. This should be here on this updated. You want all of the invitation drop nodes. You just run a bunch of T16 maps, you generate Guardian maps, you run the Guardian maps as invitations, and then you generate a bunch more Guardian maps. If you need to buy a few, you can, but you can mostly self-sustain doing this. And then while you're doing that, early on, Abyss uniques are massive value. Anytime you do an Abyss and it opens the depths, you're like averaging 1, 2, 3 divines maybe in profit on that. Darkness and Throne sells for a huge amount. All the unique jewels are valuable, Bubonics, even just a Stygian Vice, which is a guaranteed drop early on. If you get like an eye level 86, which you will in T16 maps, it'll be like 10 to 25 chaos, depending on how early you do it. Next, we're doing Ultimatum, and this should actually be like this. We talked about it. This is kind of an outdated version. I forgot to resave when I made some changes earlier. Ultimatum might be really good, or it might be mediocre. We don't know, but it's a mechanic that is very difficult, so you benefit from having an Aurabot and being able to do harder content, and you get full value for having 2 people because you get 2 sets of rewards, so it just makes sense that it would be good, and also Ultimatum is a lot of fun, right? Why not? Also just pick up this Deli Wheel because it's 4 points, and for Deli
Delirium,
Wheel, yeah, why
best
not?
league mechanic in the game.
Yep, and that's
Everybody
about it.
loves Delirium.
We'll link the Atlas tree down below. Again, this is mostly going to be valuable for like day 1, 2, 3, but honestly, Guardian farming, doing destructive play, generating boss fragments, and either running those bosses yourself or selling them, this is always going to be a valuable strat, and it's super simple and easy to do. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. All right, I think that's about it. So
I think so.
all right, thank you guys for watching. We're gonna try to get some sleep, and we'll see you today.
Hey, we might even get 7 hours this time.
Hopefully. Be like a record in the last couple. Why does it always end up so crangled? We always like
I mean,
go
by
and
our
go and
standards,
go.
this is
Getting
this
like
is
most of a night of sleep and having it,
yeah, right.
We just scope creep too much. We like want to do this thing and then we add this thing and this thing and we go and go and go.
Procrastinating, at the same time.
I don't know about you. I had finals this week. I did also procrastinate. Yeah, thanks for watching. We'll catch you later. Check out our streams.
Oh yeah. I mean, I forgot. I'm a college student. Finals. Me too. Me too. Don't blame me. No, but
see you guys later.